What I'd like to deal with here, though, is the business of war and basically the psychopathic side of it. Okay? And before I begin, I'd encourage people to, if you're listening to this on the YouTube version, to click on my website. You see the little icon at the left-hand side of the screen. And also become a subscriber to the station. Keep an update on new shows. So anyway, one of the aspects of psychopathy that I think is both a blessing and a curse, and I'll go into that in more detail in a future show, is that psychopaths try to maximize their opportunities. Okay? They try to get the best out of whatever they've been given. And the sad part is that means they often will run everyone over around them, no matter what their profession, no matter what their relationship to that person or persons. They will strive to dominate, to win, to maximize. They are the ultimate in that idea that, that business school idea of whatever wins, wins. Okay? You make money, you win. You succeed in any other endeavor, you win. That is very psychopathic. Now, here's the problem, though. And here's where I'm going to extend this to basically include our military-industrial complex. Now, if you don't know where that term comes from, it comes from Dwight Eisenhower, former president of the United States, former leader of the forces that defeated Hitler in Europe. And the thing is, in his farewell address, which you can listen to on YouTube, in his farewell address, he warned that the constant state of war readiness could lead to the expansion and greater power, which of course would lead to more expansion and greater power, of what he called the military-industrial complex. And what that really refers to is when the military has its arms extended in every direction of the U.S. economy. Now, I've dealt with it before, that Hollywood is very strongly connected to the military. The military uses Hollywood as kind of a propaganda arm. Okay? Maybe not all movies, but a lot of them. You got to ask yourself what the message is, especially in a lot of the war-related movies, even the science fiction movies that, for some reason it's always America, right, that defeats the aliens. Well, that sends a message, maybe subconsciously to the people around the world who listen to those movies too. But it goes beyond that. It goes into every aspect of industry in the U.S. that depends upon military contracts. And that can mean such things as, you might make toilets, and you wouldn't think that's a military related business. But it is if you've got a contract with the military to install plumbing or toilets or whatever in bases or in equipment. Okay? You may make food. It could be toilet paper. It could be, of course, all the components that go into the manufacture of arms and equipment, tanks, airplanes, so forth. You got to realize that a lot of businesses, really, if they didn't have those military contracts, would be hurting. And if you took out the military portion of the American economy, have you asked yourself where it would be? Now, we've been on a state of war readiness ever since World War II. Okay? The American idea about the military prior to World War II was just basically almost, just as an analogy, it'd be very similar to what we see today as the National Guard. All right. Yes, we did have ships. We had carriers. That's what Japan. They blew up the carriers in Pearl Harbor in 1941. But the thing is that these this change in which we have the massive military. The U.S. spends more on the military than I think all the other 10 major countries that have military, major militaries combined. Okay? Combined. And our military budget dwarfs that of any other nation. And the thing is, you go on to the side of maximizing profits. Well, businesses are going to continue to want to maximize their profits, and therefore they have a stake in keeping us always on edge, always believing that we're going to get invaded, we're going to be taken over, we're going to be attacked. Okay? Now, combine that with our politicians who may have large military installations or industries that make military hardware located within their districts. If you're a congressman or congresswoman, you could be like the most liberal Democrat, but you don't want that military base that generates tons of money in your district to get closed. This is why in 1991, when the Soviet Union fell, you really didn't see this reduction in military spending that most people thought would occur. You actually saw increases in it. And this is because the congressmen and senators have absolutely zero incentive to start cutting if it means cutting in their districts. And so everyone's, might think, well, yeah, I'd like to, close down this base over here, but then that congressman or senator who represents that district comes to you and says, by the way, if you close down my base, maybe we should close down the base that's in your district that, and then pretty soon, they're all like eating lunch together and laughing, having a good time, and agreeing that no base gets closed. In fact, maybe we need a little bit more money for military bases in more places and so forth. Now, here's one thing that most people don't realize, and that is Gorbachev, the last leader of the Soviet Union. He, and of course it fell, 1991, broke up, the largest portion of that remaining being the Russian Federation. Now, the Soviet Union, with Gorbachev, was stationed throughout Eastern Europe. They used Eastern Europe as their buffer zone with Nato. At that time, NATO comprised the Western European nations, such as Germany, for instance. Now, the thing is that Reagan and Bush promised Gorbachev. It was mostly, I'm not talking about the George Bush that everyone thinks of, what is he doing nowadays? Is he just like painting or something? I don't know what he's doing. But his father, the smart one, George Bush had promised Gorbachev that NATO had no intentions of spreading into Eastern Europe, and that the Soviets should go ahead and withdraw their bases from those countries. And they agreed. Okay, they left Germany and all those Eastern Germany and all those countries, and everything looked like maybe things could really improve. Maybe Russia, the United States could be friends, and and that sort of thing. But then Clinton came along, Bill Clinton, and the United States has this really strange idea that's been drummed into the population that Republicans go to war, Democrats don't. Well, nothing could be further than the truth. But anyway, that's another topic for another show. Clinton started the expansion of NATO into Eastern Europe. And you might think, well, why did they do that? Russia at the time was weak, and that sort of thing. And why go ahead and just start, increasing NATO when NATO was formed as a buffer to the Soviet Union and its expansion based on an ideology, based on communism? Well, really, you could look at several different factors. One is that some of these Eastern European countries, understandably speaking, thanks to their history, they were a little worried that Russia could maybe do a reversal and come back in. But at the same time, you had a lot of businesses in the United States that were like, whoa, think about all the military spending this could generate. Because these countries became new clients, new customers. Okay? They had to buy their arms from somewhere, and the American arms industry is a place to get it, especially since it's all compatible with NATO standards. That's a problem if you build military hardware that maybe your jet fighter has to be refueled through your own country's forces. And if there is a war or some sort of military campaign in which you are not part of NATO, this happened in reference to the destruction of Libya a few years back by NATO. There were countries that took part, but they weren't officially members, and therefore they had a hard time refueling their jet fighters. And the thing is that if you suddenly have this huge area of the world, that being Eastern Europe, becoming clients, that makes more money. So, that goes into it as well. Okay? That becomes that becomes an incentive. So now you've got new clients, and do you think you're going to be saying, well, now that you've got these new jets and these new tanks and all of that stuff, maybe now things will be okay? No, because you want those countries to continue buying. It's just like a deodorant commercial on TV. What's it based on? It's based on the idea of making you scared that you're going to be out there and maybe giving a business presentation, and all of a sudden the deodorant's not working, and everyone's going to see, your wet underarms through your shirts or blouse or something like that. And the thing is that makes you feel fear, and therefore you buy. Okay? You're like, oh my gosh, I don't want that to happen. And the same is based today. Drum up fear. Oh my gosh, the Russians, Freudian slip there. The Russians are coming. We need more arms. We need to, build up our defense because the Russians. And then later, even though the irony is that Clinton, with the trade deals he made with China, made it very, really helped build up the Chinese economy, which enabled them to really build up their military. And now you start seeing the war drums beating, in reference to the South China Seas. And so who's benefiting from this? It's not the Chinese. It's not the Russians. It's really not even the Eastern Europeans or so forth, or the Western Europeans. It's the United States arms industry. And again, when your economy is in the dumps like the United States is, I don't care how much Hillary Clinton wants to make it sound like that, oh my gosh, America's already great, Donald Trump, don't listen to him, that sort of thing. The thing is that the U.S. economy, if you don't believe me, you look at how many middle-class people are scared to death they're going to lose their homes. How many of them are living paycheck to paycheck? All right? How many of them skip their vacations because they're so scared that if they go on vacation, they might weaken them in reference to their job position? Okay? Go through any working class community that used to be thriving during the 1990s, and look how many businesses are barely making it. There's a totally different atmosphere in the United States than there was in the 1990s, okay? And, you got Democrats blaming Republicans and Republicans blaming Democrats, that sort of thing. I don't care what the deal is. Take a look at where it's at. It's not in a pretty place. So therefore, if you keep this whole war economy thing going, borrowing money so you can finance it, at least it keeps men and women going to work and paying their bills. And that is something that congressmen and senators understand. And so therefore, they promote it more and more and more. And then you get a lot of neoconservatives that will get up and they'll start saying, oh, we've got these threats here and here and here. We've got to build new nuclear this and aircraft carriers and airplanes and that sort of thing. And, deep down, they're phonies. They know that there is not this big threat. Or if they're, maybe when they get up there with this rhetoric, they're starting to cause it. And, of course, the media plays along. All right? I mean, Vladimir Putin got up recently and said, he chastised the media at this big event. He said, you guys have got to start letting people know how dangerous this situation is right now. So while the United States is like, and there's an echo chamber in much of Western Europe, is saying, we've got to watch out for those Russians and so forth, and start doing military exercises right on their border. This is forcing the Russians to have to build up their military. And then the Chinese are looking at things in the South China Sea, and they're having to build up their military. And the more this builds up, the more we may get back to a World War I situation in which it finally just explodes, and voila, we're living The Walking Dead. Okay? In which The Walking Dead has this really horrible dystopian atmosphere where, every day is a fight for survival. Guess what the aftermath of World War III would be? Okay? If just losing the energy power grid of the United States would result in 200 million deaths in 1 year. 200 million. Okay? We've had shows about this. I've interviewed experts on this. 200 million dead. Think about, and that's without even a war. Think about what it would be like if you did have a war. Okay? In which much of the infrastructure would be destroyed. This is one of the disadvantages of psychopathy. Is often, not always, but often psychopaths will take things to their final breaking point in which it finally just falls apart around them. Okay? Not always, but often. And this is what we're doing right now. Our country is pursuing a psychopathic-driven, military-minded build-up that at some point could very easily snap with some very bad results. There is no good result with a confrontation with a major power. And you may think, we took out Libya. Libya had a freaking population of 5 million people. The same with Serbia. It had it was more than 5 million, but it was, we're talking small countries. Iraq, all these countries. You take on a big country with real military hardware, and that is a disaster. That will, you may have all this economic advantages now, but those economic advantages will evaporate if, the unthinkable happens. And I want people to think about that. Just think the fact that if we pursue these policies for much longer, it might be a little bit too late to go back. Anyway, just something to think about there. I hope you return again next week for another edition of Unlock the Door Radio here on UCY TV Productions, where, hey, our motto, question authority at all times. Thank you.
JJ Inc. from Against the Wall, and you're listening